Hey everybody, it's Haley again and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking specifically about cutting words out of your manuscripts while you're editing them. And this is one of the most painful things that you guys have to do. And that's the thing, is that it's just not optional. I still, every single time I have to go back through my manuscript, I try to cut as much as I can out. And I will tell you guys kind of the story behind where this all started. So I had been working, a lot of you guys know this story already, but it took me 5 years to write Secrets of the Tally and another 7 years of editing it before it was ready to publish. So I had been working on this book for a very, very long time. By the time, gosh, I was probably 10 years in when I very first got professional advice, like advice related to my book from an actual person in the industry, not my friends, not my family, but somebody who actually knew, what was what in the book world. And that was the very first time, you guys, that I found out that my book was way too long. So young adult is typically, if you're trying to pitch it to an agent and get it picked up, which I was at the time, you need it to be under 100,000 words. I probably quite a bit less than that, preferably. So in our 60-day novel writing challenge, we're just trying to hit 50,000 words, right? That is an entire book in itself. 100,000 words is a much more substantial book. And I had a manuscript that was 150,000 words. And I found out something that I didn't know. I thought that if my book was great, nobody would care that it was 150,000 words. But I found out that day that they do care, and they won't even look at it if it's over 100,000. And so I suddenly had this task that I had to cut 50,000 words out of my book, which, as we just said, is an entire book in itself. I had to cut that much out. And I want to tell you guys, it was one of the most painful things I ever had to do. And I had to do it in a really, really short period of time, just because, because of the timing, I was pitching it to agents at that time. They were asking to see it, and I was just very quietly omitting the fact it was 150,000 words, because I was like, oh, I'll get those words out before I send it to them. And so in a very short period of time, I had to cut out a third of my work. My precious baby, the thing that I had poured my heart and soul into for, I really think it was 10 years at that point, I had to cut a third of it. And so I want to tell you guys about what I learned, how I did it. If you guys are in the same boat, if you are, close to 100,000 words, it's probably, if you're trying to pitch it, a good idea to get it down as much as you can before you send it out. If you're over 100,000 words, you have to get it below 100 before anyone will really take you seriously. And I'm sure someone's going to email me at some point and be like, oh, nope, someone took me seriously at 120. But just as a general rule, you guys understand that agents want things that are shorter for several reasons. And we talked about this in the 60-day challenge a little bit too. But one of the big ones is that it costs substantially more money to print a book that is longer. The difference between a 100,000 word book and a 150,000 word book is thousands and thousands of dollars worth of money saved. And also, they just don't know you that well. So they don't want to take a big chance and put all that money into a giant print run for books that are bigger than they have to be. And that was the case with mine. It was 150,000 words, and that was way bigger than it needed to be. And I know that now because I was able to cut 50,000 words. And after I did, it was so much stronger. It was such a better book. If I had sent it to them in the state that it was in when it was 150,000 words, it would have never, I never would have signed with an agent. It would have never been picked up. Nothing would have come of it if I had sent it in the state that it was in, even if there wasn't that moratorium on anything over 100,000. So I want to tell you guys just kind of about my process that I went through to cut that many words out of a manuscript. And you know what? Even if you don't have to cut words, this may be something to look at as you go through your editing, because from what I've learned, it really does make your writing and your story so much stronger. So to get started, take it in tiers. So if you need to cut a big word count or any words at all, take it in, do the big tiers first, the smaller tiers later. So what I mean by that is start with the big structural changes that you can make. So looking through and seeing where can I take out an entire scene, an entire chapter? Where can I combine two characters into one character? Like, really examine everything on the big story level and try to see what can possibly go. So anything that's like a transition scene where your characters just need to get from one place to another place, and so they have a scene where they travel there. Ugh, get rid of every one of those. Unless it is so exciting and great to read, they're almost always horrible and boring. So take all of those out. Really take a look at every one of your characters and ask yourself how essential it is that you have them in the story. Can you completely delete them, or is it possible to combine them with someone else? Like if you guys have to cut 50,000 words out of your manuscript, seriously, you have to find big level changes. Anything that is not related to your main plot is up on the chopping block. Really, like, it really probably should go. If it's not directly moving your main plot forward, then it's not something that has to be in the story. And if it doesn't have to be, the story is probably stronger without it. So even like the flashbacks where you're explaining your character's backstory, if that is not moving your plot forward, it's gotta go. If it's a big scene where you explain the science of the world, or you're explaining just like the history of how they came to be how they are, if it is not moving your plot directly forward, it's gotta go. Take it out, sprinkle that information in somewhere else in somebody else's conversation if it's really essential to the plot, but don't have a scene just dedicated to information anywhere. Plot has to be going forward in every single one. And once you have that mindset, you'll find a lot of fluffy scenes that you can take out. It's just fluff. It's not something that's needed. And if it's not needed, then it needs to go, and your story will be a lot stronger because of it. So big structural changes first. So once you have gone through and you feel like you have done everything you can to take out, and you know, it does require rewriting a lot of the story sometimes to fill in those holes where you took out a scene. You can't just take it out and submit it. You know, there's a lot of doctoring up that has to go on in your manuscript after you take those spots out. So once you do all those big structural changes, the next thing that I did when I had to cut all those words was to go paragraph by paragraph. And then I took that same mentality of, does this paragraph move the plot forward? And I know that seems a little bit extreme, but there's a lot of paragraphs that don't. There's a lot of, you know, world building that comes up where you have a whole paragraph describing something that happened 10 years ago. And did you need that? Is it completely 100% necessary to moving the story forward? And in a lot of cases, it wasn't. On a smaller scale, I had a lot of those transitional scenes too, of like, they were, you know, hanging out, having a good time sparring in the wreck, and then they needed to go back to their rooms. And so there'd be a paragraph where they walk through the tunnels and they take a left and then a right, and then they have to climb up into the tunnel above. And that is boring. And I didn't realize that until I cut it out and went back later and was like, this is so much better without this. I skimmed over this part every time I was reading it. That's another really good sign. If you find yourself skimming while you're reading, whatever you're reading needs to go because it's boring. And if it's boring to you as the author, it is going to be way more boring to the reader. So kind of pro tip, I know it's painful, but paragraph by paragraph is the next way that you got to go. Take out anything that could possibly be looked at as fluff, that is not somehow exciting or engaging. If it doesn't make your reader feel something and it's not moving that plot forward, then it doesn't need to be in there. Next was literally sentence by sentence. So I'm telling you, like, each time I did, you know, the structural and then the paragraphs and then the sentences, it's like an entire read through of the book. It is an entire editing run through the book. This is how you get rid of words when you really have to. So sentence by sentence, same thing. Does this sentence move the plot forward? Is it 100% necessary? Do I have to have it? I took out every sentence that did not do those things. And then, I know this seems so extreme, you guys, but word by word. So you'll start to notice patterns in your writing of, if you're reading a sentence and you really critically read through it and you find a couple of words that you can take out, chances are you can run a search on those words through the rest of your document and find a ton more cases where you use them in exactly the same way, and they could be cut out in exactly the same way. So an example would be like, there's almost like tags sometimes that I add to the beginning of my sentences where I'll say like, he heard a sound in the distance that sounded like thunder, which is not really that great of a sentence, but one of the things that we could fix right off the bat for that, instead of saying he heard, just say a sound like thunder rolled in from the distance. And that cuts 2 words out of that sentence that you didn't need, but now you also know you can run a search on the rest of your document for those words he heard, she heard. And then, you know, once you're kind of in that frame of mind, think, well, maybe I could apply that to the other senses too, right? So instead of saying he saw a monster running in the distance, just say a monster ran through the trees in the distance. Cutting all of those out, you're taking a couple words out of every single sentence, which, you know, one at a time doesn't seem like that big of a difference, but if you can spot those trends in your writing, and each time you critically examine a sentence, you figure out what you can cut, you can a lot of times apply that to the rest of the book and cut it out in a lot of different places. And then those big changes end up bringing your word count down quite a bit as well. So that is basically, if I had to do this all over again, that is how I would do it. And I do go through this process with my current manuscripts as well. You know, I structural changes first. I look through the book for anything that I possibly think is boring, and I take it out. So when I read it, my rule for myself is that because I know what's coming, I should be looking forward to every single page. Just knowing what's on it, I should know that this next page is something I'm so excited to read. And if I don't have that feeling, if I'm coming up on a page and I'm like, oh, I don't really love this part, I'll just skim it. That is a bad sign. And so if I ever feel that in my own writing, I really, really try to examine that spot and either find a way to make it way more exciting or take it out. So even if you are within a very good word count, I would recommend doing this anyways. Take a look at the structure, take a look at every paragraph, then take a look at every sentence, take a look at every word, because, you know, the more concisely you write, the more emotion, the more feeling, the more everything you can pack into the page. So if you can write the same thing, so this is something that we talked about in the 60-day challenge too, is that if I can write a page twice as concisely as you. So if I can cut out so many words, and we can say the same thing, but I can say it in half the time. When I write a page and you write a page, I will have twice as much stuff on that page, twice as much feeling, twice as much emotion, twice as much drama and action and stuff going on. And readers like that. When they get through the end of a page, it's better if they have experienced a whole world of action and excitement instead of half a page of action and half a page of fluff. So the more you are able to cut those words out, the better off you are. So that is everything that I have to say about cutting words. I hope that you guys never find yourself in the situation where you have a 150,000 word manuscript. But if you do, this is something you need to do. And even if you're going to self-publish, so here's the thing is, self-publishing does not have those requirements. You can have whatever word count you want. You could have a 300,000 word book. But it helps so much to go through this process and cut out as much as you can. So for the sake of being the best writer that you can and having the best manuscript that you can, this is something that I highly recommend, going through every one of these steps, trying to cut as much as you can, and then your book will be as concise and action-packed and as exciting as you can possibly make it. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you guys haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for tuning in.